Hey everybody, Jim Duncan with Nest Realty here in Charlottesville, Virginia, sitting here with Greg Slater, both associate brokers with Nest. It's early July 2024.
It's very hot.
It's very hot, and it's been very hot, and it's probably, as I'm fond of saying, it's the coolest summer we're going to have for the rest of our lives, which is fantastic.
It's pretty dry too.
Yeah, it is dry too. It's been an interesting year. We've seen a shift in the market, I think, that we're all seeing and feeling it. Greg, if you were to tell someone a synopsis of the market right now in 60 seconds or less, what would you tell a consumer coming into the Charlottesville market cold?
I would tell them our trends aren't necessarily in line with what they may be consuming on a national level. The macro level can paint a different picture sometimes. We still live in a very desirable place to live that people are coming to. I don't think we've exhausted 100% of our pent-up demand. On the resale side, the inventory levels remain historically low. The pace that those listings come to the market remain historically low and have become hyper seasonal in some cases. On the new construction side, we live in an environment where it can be a very lengthy process to get new lots to the market. And then, of course, the process to get a home started and all of those things can be slower than some people expect in other markets. So we're constrained on the resale side, and we're constrained somewhat on the new construction side for different reasons, and they're separate conversations. But
I think they're all separate. I mean, I think that every conversation is unique and specific to the person to whom I'm having it. Because if a buyer's coming in cold to our market from X market, I need to spend some time explaining that the Charlottesville, Albemarle, Central Virginia market is very different in many regards from the national ones. You see the headlines of inventories up 40% nationally, year over year. We're not seeing that 40% increase in inventory, in large part because we are a great place to live. A lot of my buyers who bought 10, 12, 15 years ago are still there. One, they love living here, and two, the interest rate lock-in effect is real. If you have a sub 3% mortgage rate, it's going to take something to kick you out of that home and that lifestyle to make that next shift. So I think that we tend to track, if we're doing this for 20 some odd years, I think the Charlottesville market tracks arbitrarily 7 to 15 months behind national markets. So we might see an increase in inventory in mid 2025 that's significant. But right now it feels like, for all the reasons you mentioned, we are a constrained market. There are more buyers who want to buy in this area, and we're seeing that shift also from those who are able to afford Charlottesville, Albemarle, they buy here, but those who are looking for a bit more value are shifting up the mountain to Stanton, Waynesboro, Augusta market. So I think it's a shift that we're seeing as well in our market.
Sure, that conversation is different for every client because at different price points, at different types of homes, the demand levels are different and the inventory levels are different. So as an example, this attached primary suite on the main level market is actually one of the softest in our market right now because the seasonality of that market is almost nil because that's people when they choose to sell that home and make that big lifestyle move. And that doesn't happen with the seasons, like things related to the school year and vacations. But the builders, when we talk about the new construction side of the inventory, we've created all these new communities are much more dense. Mm-hmm. The attached product creation exceeds the detached product creation. I think the builders heard us in the 2000s loud and clear that we wanted more product for the people who wanted a primary main level suite. And there are resales available in that space, but you're also still competing with new construction. And I recently sold a resale, that's why I say that. And when everybody expects something to sell, and that's one of the challenges with people coming to this market based on where they're coming from. A lot of people still have the expectation that everything sells with multiple offers in 1 to 3 days, and that's not the case anymore.
It's not for everything, and I think it's also the seller stickiness is significant. It's been that way since we've both been practicing, is that if the seller's anchor is here, based on everything that they read and their neighbors 3 doors down sold 6 months ago. That anchor is here, and the market data that we provide and the reality and the insight is something that's going to be very different perhaps.
Over the last few years, I've also talked to people who have, from a buyer's perspective, tried to wait it out and thought maybe things would get better sooner because of what they are seeing on a national level. And that's a tough conversation to have because, while I don't ever try to really predict the future because you can't time the market in any regard, and I know people who've tried it. I think our inventory problem is years long to unwind, and I just don't know how many it is. This is not, oh my goodness, by the time we get to next spring and turn into the new year, people are going to be ready to sell their homes. I'll ask you a question I actually participate in the Ivy Zelman data research process, and they send me a questionnaire every month. They added a new question. So I've been doing it for a year, and every month the questions are exactly the same because they want the same data points. The new question this time was, at what interest rates do we see a significant unlocking of the market? And it started at 7 and went down to 4, in most cases about 0.5% interest. And I really didn't know the answer, but I needed to check something, and I checked 5.5. And the only reason I checked 5.5 is because I don't think 6 is enough to matter, and something below 6 might.
I just wrote down before you said anything. I said 5.75. Yeah, I think 6 is not enough. 6% is not enough of a drop down from the 7, where 7-ish where they are today. I think that I would be astonished if we got to 4 in my lifetime. But I think 5.5, 5.75 is enough to open that up, because that's where you have that real delta between, one, you're able to, the increase from your 3 to 5 is not as great as 3 to 7, obviously. And if you're looking at 7 and can't afford it, 1/8 of a point is not going to be enough to move you off the couch. It has to be something significant. When we do price drops,
that's the same thing. That's where I was going. There's a financial math and there's a psychology of it. And when you think about that interest rate impact on the overall market, the interest rates coming down help people that are on the sideline afford more, because we have to talk about affordability at some point, because that's one of the things that is slowing our market down. It's not just the inventory anymore, it's the price of our homes have appreciated so much, it's slowing our market down. But then you have to think about it from that seller who's been thinking about selling. Where do those interest rates get low enough that they have enough equity to adjust their price to where it needs to be, and the interest rates are good enough to help them go buy what they want at their next stop. And that's the only way to really unlock this. And even when we reach the tipping point, it's a slow unwinding.
It's extremely slow, because sellers they need a compelling reason to sell. It has to be a life shift. And I think that's the reason that most sellers sell is because not necessarily a discretionary move, but because they're moving, at least through my lens right now, is they're moving to be closer to the grandkids. And they're moving to be, they're buying in the area to be close to grandkids, and they're selling in the area to go wherever the grandkids are, because they will follow the I was going to say the favorite kid, but they're going to follow the grandkids. Yes,
look, buying and selling real estate is wrapped around by a lot of emotion and a lot of logistical challenges, and it's every one of them is unique and happens on its own pace.
And to put a pin on that, I think that what I try to do with my clients, whether they're buying or selling, is to actively listen. And not like actively listen, but to pay attention and to hear them and to ask them the right questions of themselves and for my purposes, so I can better understand what they're looking for, and so that they can better understand their motivations, their financials, and what the process is going to be and the timeline to get to where they need to be, whether they're buying or selling.
And to wrap up that thought, the advice is, when you find that agent you trust, actively engage and open up to them, because if you find that agent that is actively listing and is trying to give advice based on your wants and needs and expectations, it's important. Yeah. It's hard to give advice to someone who hasn't really opened the door to helping you understand how they really feel about things.
I ran some numbers. I want to see if you get a similar result. Brownsville and Crozet, year over year, first half of 23 versus 24, median price was down about $50,000, and days on market was up about 2 days. Number of sales in Brownsville and Crozet was up from 135 last year to midpoint to 156 this year. But the thing that really struck me was looking at Brownsville and Crozet, number of ratified contracts. Last year was 104, first half of the year. This year was 103. But the telling part for me was that the median price last year was $490, and this year it was $576 for contracts written in the first half of 2024. Does that feel right to you? Is it tracked? Does it?
Well, it feels right. So the first stats you said where you're talking about closed data and then you switch to contracts.
Yep.
I almost never follow closed data because it just doesn't help me. I lived it and I understand what happened, and it, particularly when 25 to 40% of the activity is new construction, that closed data, you have to go look at when the contract. Yep. So I follow the contracts, and I think what you're seeing there in Crozet is one of the things we talk about on the new construction side. New construction supply can really impact a market. And a market like Crozet is really impacted by new construction. And so the uptick in higher density communities and more attached product is what's going to pull down on the median price. Yep. The locked-in effect for some of the larger homes that people want to give are taking those out of the inventory. Because if you, from $700 to $1 million on a 2/10 of an acre or more for a family home, that's still in great demand and can expect to be sold in the first weekend if it's priced right. Right. But there are a lot of the townhomes aren't that way, the villas are not that way, and so yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense the way those numbers are shaking out when the contracts are showing you that we're running out of. The other reason you might see that, you know how many single family detached lots are vacant and available to build in a community on less than a half an acre right now in Crozet? None. 3. And you know when we'll get more? Have you driven past the trees coming down in the front of Old Trail? Yep. Those are the next ones because none of the other ones that have been approved have started the development process. Right. And so we're going to likely go through a period for 6 months or a year where, well, you won't be able to move into a brand new single family detached home if you haven't already contracted on it. Now you'll be able to buy one, but then you'll be waiting for it to be built. It'll depend on when the builders start taking contracts and how far out those deliveries will be. But you know, for the second half of this year and the first half of 2025, people who are selling those homes in Crozet have a different analysis to do because they may not particularly be competing with new construction.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting time. I think it's a whole separate conversation about the need for growth, attached homes, inventory, infrastructure, et cetera. But I think that for the foreseeable future in Crozet, that we don't even have anything under 400 really. But the 475 to 700 is I think is still going to be the sweet spot for a lot of people coming in, which means those neighborhoods are going to be in super high demand as they have been for 15, 20 years.
They have been. And you know, townhomes have to fill it. I mean, the most inventory you have in that price point is going to be attached now, or it's going to be 20 years old. And even the stuff that was developed in before Old Trail in Crozet, we've watched these price points push into the 6s for the first time. In some case, is to the 700s, and basically setting records for price points.
Which again, it's for me and you. I think it's you look at the sociological changes and the needs for the community is that we need more homes, you know, sub 4 in order to have have more people live in Crozet. But that's a whole nother conversation. If a new buyer comes to you and says, "I'm looking to buy in X months," how long should that be for them to start that transition period to interview agents and to?
Well, when they show up, it's now. And I don't care what the timeline is, because if it's less than 6 months, it's now. If it's more than 6 months, it's now. Mm-hmm. You have to start to understand the market, and you have to start to see things come and go, and you have to go look at some things you don't want to buy because your criteria is going to change inevitably in the process. So I don't have a timeline that I recommend as a minimum. The answer is now.
So I tell my buyers that if they have the luxury, if my buyer clients have the luxury, I want them to have at least a few months of watching the market and feeling the market and seeing homes and understanding what these data points are in their particular micro market. Because that, if they're in the 600 to 800 price point, sub 6 is not really relevant. 1 million plus is not relevant. I want them focusing right on where they need to be so that when they see that one comes on the market at 650, they instinctively know, maybe better than I do, they know that 650 is overpriced. And they say, okay, well, I'll see the price reduction in 3 weeks. Or if it comes on at 625, they know instinctively, I need to talk to Jim. I need to maybe take off work or go get him to get a video or something, but they have to feel that because I know at 650 it's overpriced. But
that doesn't mean it's not going to sell.
It doesn't mean it's not going to sell, but I want them in the driver's seat to say, I, the client, am making the decision to not pull the trigger today. They need to be in the power position of understanding that where their threshold is, and they need to know that market. Because that time's going to come that regardless of market, slow or fast, that house is going to come on the market, it's going to be the right one, and they're going to be one of two offers. And they need to be the ones who are making that decision. In the city of Charlottesville, we have the new zoning in 2024. I think we're going to see a little bit more understanding of what that means. For the redevelopment of the city, I think we've all heard anecdotally that what people wanted to do might not be fiscally viable because the cost of building are going to be a bit more challenging.
The cost of development is unknown until you start to try to develop it.
I mean, I talked to one person who said that they wanted to go from a duplex to a quadplex, and that meant they needed to sprinkler the house, which made it a non-starter.
Cost prohibitive. Look, the basic math you have to do if you even want to go down this road, and most agents can't even do this. Mm-hmm. But if you have a property that will take 6 homes, it's probably 6 townhomes.
Yep.
Do you know what a developed Albemarle County townhome lot is worth right now?
Right now?
Yeah.
I've got my guess.
Well, it depends on where it is. We don't have to put a number on it now. Yeah. But so then you take that number times 6. That's not the value of the property. No. And I'm seeing properties listed in the rezoning spaces that is like, yeah, you couldn't get that if the lots were developed with water and sewer and a driveway and a place to put a foundation already approved.
I think right now in July you're seeing some testing in the market. You're seeing some properties that have been rezoned, and agents and sellers are testing the market to see where that threshold is. And again, I think in 18, 36 months we'll have a better understanding of what's happening today. It goes. I've said this a few times about the settlements and about the zoning and a lot of stuff that. Going back to when they passed the health care bill in the U.S., one of the senators or House reps said, we need to pass the bill in order to see what's in it. I think that's where we are right now. They passed the zoning, and we're figuring out exactly how it's going to play out. That's right,
and how are we going to get there? Somebody who has enough money and time and risk averse enough to go ahead and roll the dice, or is it going to take 6-month-long study periods?
Yeah.
The cost of figuring out. I've been involved with people doing small scale projects in the city, and I represent a developer and a builder that builds infill in the city, and to see what they go through to get to the point they can actually get a home started, much less completed, is remarkable. And the hidden costs or the unforeseen costs that are induced by the nature of the property or what the city administrators want and everything is it's mind-boggling. And I think that novice coming from out of the area who wants to own a piece of Charlottesville and own this nice property that they can have income from 6 units or whatever just doesn't quite understand that. And there are not a lot of people with enough expertise, at least in our industry, I think, that can lead them to that quantifiably.
Completely agree. So going forward, I think it's going to be an interesting 24 and always an interesting 25. I'm Jim Duncan with Nest Realty, 434-242-7140. And Jim at nestrealty.com.
And I'm Greg Slater with Nest Realty, 434-981-6655. Greg Slater at nestrealty.com. And as I've said before, we put our numbers out there because we want to hear from you. We like to talk.